Hi, all. Welcome to this session on organizational change. We have to agree and we have to accept the fact that change is probably the only constant thing that prevails around us, and the same thing holds good to organizations. In the context of business organizations, change is the only constantly evolving thing. And if you look on the timeline, if you observe the rate at which the change in whatever aspect, it could be change in terms of demographics, change in terms of strategy or technology, infrastructure, customer segments, or anything, you name it, and that changes. And if you look at the rate of change that used to prevail about a couple of decades ago, the rate of change was relatively slower. If you look around the business context in the contemporary times, in the current times, the rate of change has become more rapid, has more accelerated, and and there's hardly anything that stays for a long period of time, and hence the organizations have all the more a reason now. Organizations, the businesses that operate in the current times are all the more pressed to stay responsive, stay adaptable, stay agile to the change that might strike them from anywhere. You can hardly predict. Change can come in form of a policy at the country level, at the economic level. Change can come in form of an acquisition, a merger. It can come in form of a management turnover, management change of board, anything, a change of technology, as we said, or change of the product lines, the business space, right? So, uh, so as we said, it can come in form of any of these aspects, and hence the organizations have to operate in a very agile and adaptable and responsive manner to stay prepared to the call for change. So in this chapter, we will deep dive into the various aspects that explain, that present various thought works, various opinions, various frameworks around the change, organizational change. Okay, so to start with, as the slide suggests, organizational change, which can be defined loosely as organization's movement from present state to an improved state, right? So it can be from a technology, from the conventional ERP technology to premises based ERP technology to SAP, to a cloud managed resource planning system, or it could be from analog to digital, or it could be from diesel run, petrol run, fuel run to a battery run, or electric battery run. So um, or the presence in Asia to presence in US markets. So it could be any form of change, but it's a movement. What it is, it can be defined as a movement from the existing state, from the current state, from present state to an improved state, right? So change management comprises basically three elements, namely the firm, the management, and the people. So all three collectively as a bundle evolve together from the current state to a better state in the name of change. Okay, so that takes us to the next one. Types of change, how the organizations react, or how the organizations respond to change, and what is the by nature of change. Change can either be evolutionary. Evolutionary change is something that is always there as a part of the system. We evolve by size, by strength, by nature of business, by presence, by infrastructure. We keep changing, but then which is called evolutionary. But then there are some changes which are absolutely unexpected, radical, unpredictable, and they just strike from nowhere. Like we had all observed, witnessed, and we have gone through a change of the entertainment segment. Hardly there was anything called OTT segment until about 10 years ago. But then now, every household, almost every household, is tuned to some or the other OTT platform on their televisions. The entertainment, which was a subject of an external entity until a while ago, has rammed into every household, and it has redefined, it has demystified the definition of entertainment. So that can be called as revolutionary change. Okay, so those were revolutionary. Whereas how organizations respond to change, they may either be proactive. What do we mean by proactive? When the organization looks at the change before the change strikes the organization, that can be defined as proactive. So, for instance, if some of the organizations like Amazon, Salesforce, they had identified, they had researched, and they had come out with an alternative solution to the premises-based infrastructure management, resource management system, and they proactively they offered their respective cloud services, which can be called as proactive. And then it was followed by the other organizations like Microsoft, IBM, who were a little late, but then they caught up and they reacted to the change. Right? They were not proactive, but they reacted to the change, and they also started offering their services. So that's the basic difference between proactive and reactive change. Okay. Uh, so change could come in the name of what force? The force behind the change could vary, could be more than one, or could be of various types. We will look at some of the forces that can compel the organizations to affect the process of change. Right? Nature of workforce. So I'm sure we can recall that the organizational behavior has identified various generations of populations, and they have labeled them with various typical nomenclatures, like those who lived in 50s and 60s are referred to as the war veterans, and the next decade population is referred to as baby boomers, as it had witnessed an explosion in population post World War II. The generation is referred to as baby boomers, and the subsequent generation is referred to as Generation X, subsequent Generation Y or millennials, and the subsequent. So, why do they attribute this nomenclature, these names to the generations? Because each of these generations vary in terms of their preferences, their orientation, their perceptions, their understanding of the world, their maturity, their inclinations, their tastes, their ideologies, um, their moral values. All these fundamentals of humanity have witnessed a change from generation to generation. So when your workplace is witnessing replacement of one generation of workforce with another generation of workforce, then it is a change, because the entire ideology of the workforce is changing, their inclinations, their preferences are changing. So that could be acting as a force of change um, in the organization. Likewise, technology, we have seen radical shifts in technology that have taken place. Like if you take as simple a gadget as a music systems, right? We used to have, if you go to the days of black and white, we used to have the gramophones, which transformed to those big table-based music players with a huge body and a band-like thing, which got squeezed further to thanks to Sony, which got squeezed to a Walkman, and which totally got transformed from analog because of the transition of the tech world from analog to digital. Thanks to Apple, now we had iPods. So each of these was a revolution in itself. And here you see technology as the force for the change. Economic shocks, we have seen several economic shocks right from the Great Depression of 30s to we have seen Hang Seng crisis, we have seen subprime crisis, um, we have seen the economic crisis due to the COVID. So it has been quite a cyclical observation. Every 10 years in different names, a certain kind of economic crisis has been hitting various parts of the economies of various parts of the world. So in that case, economic shocks can be referred to as the force for change. Competition can be force for change, right? So you have seen competition. You may have observed that some companies, owing to the force of competition, they cease to exist. Like we have discussed several times. You call it BlackBerry, you call it Nokia, you call it Motorola. Do you see those products anymore? Why? Because they failed to observe the competition, and they gave in to the competition, and yes, they had to shut down their shops. Okay. More social trends. Social trends might change along with the change in the generational interests and the growth of technology. The social trends might change, as you see. Um, the social platforms, the tech, digitalization, all these are forces that bring about a new wave of social trend. Politics, world politics, you call it various global bodies which compel the countries to change, like the Kyoto Protocol, Cancun Convention, or Davos Convention, where the organizations meet to discuss the climate, the environment, the carbon emissions, and then they arrive at certain generally acceptable, mutually agreeable do's and don'ts, and they go away with certain resolutions, certain guidance, certain promises for the next 5 years, 10 years. One of the examples because of the world politics, the change that we had seen is the transition of India's stand on carbon emissions, where we transition from BS5 to BS6, where BS stands for Bharat stage. So Bharat has moved from stage 5 to stage 6, and that's how we identify all the vehicles that are being made now, cars or two wheelers or any vehicle, has to be in strict adherence to the norms of BS6, which is political development, which is which is percolating, which is flowing down to organizations and its activities, right? So those are the forces of change. And then uh, planned change activities that are intentional and goal oriented. Sometimes the change may not be planned, you may be compelled because of an unforeseen or unpredicted change. Change agents. Who are change agents? Those people who act as catalysts, those who are driving the change, who are leading the change, who take up the responsibility for managing change activities. So for instance, we've discussed this many times. IBM, when it was in trouble, they had brought in a, a turnaround specialist called Louis Gussner. Louis Gussner can be here named as the change agent who had taken up the responsibility to bring IBM out of a near bankruptcy kind of stage by turning it around and by taking some of the all-time radical decisions in the history of IBM, right? So uh, that's those are the change agents. Likewise, and in the next generation of IBM, in fact, again, about 10 years ago, we could see another CEO, IBM, called Sam Palmisano, who had taken up the responsibility again when IBM was not doing greatly, and he had taken up some of the very sweeping transformational changes that he had effected in IBM. Okay, resistance. Whenever there is a call for change, there is a resistance to change too. That's the natural human tendency. For instance, if you are having a class at 9:30 in the morning. If there is a call to have a class at 8 o'clock or 7:30 in the morning, there will definitely be a resistance, right? And how to deal with the resistance? You have to deal. What are the forms of resistance? One, overt and immediate. That is overt. What do you mean by overt? Overt is something that is very clear, visible, evident. Who is resisting? Why they are resisting? The voices are clear, loud, and open. You know, and it is immediate. Voicing complaints, engaging in job actions, etc. Whereas implicit and deferred are more difficult and challenging sources of resistance to change, where you don't see very clearly where the resistance is coming from, in what intensity and frequency, where you don't know who to address, who to deal with, who to manage, right? So, loss of employee loyalty and motivation, increased errors or mistakes. So, these are some of the implicit, you don't know whether they are intentionally done or unintentionally, whether it is done with this chap or that chap. It's tough to figure out clearly as to where is the resistance coming from. Okay, that's so sources of resistance to change. You can identify those four sources. If you look at the right bottom corner, individual level forces, where people are marred with biases, they have their own perceptions. If there is a merger or an acquisition, say for instance, an organization I was working with, it was a tech organization which was to be taken out. It was a financial services firm. Sorry, it was a financial services organization which was to be acquired by a tech firm. So there was a there were apprehensions among people. How can a tech firm take over a financial services firm? What will be the future of all those financial services, financial professionals? How can a tech firm cater to or address or accommodate the financial professionals, etc. A lot of uncertainty, a lot of perceptions, fear of loss. So all those had crept in, and it was becoming tough. The resistance was was growing within the organization. Likewise, if you look at the right top corner, group level forces, group norms, group cohesiveness, group think, where group collectively gets together and they determine to resist the change. This is more of a tendency or a behavior of the blue collared unions, where the management decisions are usually are resisted by the blue collared the unions, the employees of the unions. They resist, they walk out, they tool down, they slow their work, or they call for a lockout, etc. If you look at the left bottom corner, sub-unit level forces, where differences in orientation, power and conflict. So when there is a clash of powers, clash of egos, or application of politics, exercising politics within the organization, that can be termed as subunit. And the organization level forces, where the structure and culture of organization itself is becoming a hindrance for the change, or the strategy of the organization is a hindrance. Over determination, or not able to assess, not able to evaluate, not able to evaluate properly, is could be the other force of resistance at the organizational level. So those were the sources of resistance to organization. So individual forces, as we have discussed, we've discussed this, habits, or the fear of losing out, economic factors, etc. Organizational, as we discussed again, structural inertia, the organization structure, or limited focus of change. Group inertia. Inertia is, what do you mean by inertia? Inertia is the laxity, the initial laxity, and a tendency to remain in the same state, the status quo. It is tough to shake up and move to. So that structural or the group inertia of being in the same state, being as a group, might prevent people from changing. Threat to expertise, that can be threat to expertise, when your existing expertise is being threatened, is being questioned, is being taken away by a competition, then there can be a resistance. Threat to established resource allocation. That's another sensitive area which might make the people or the organizations insecure. Um, so, for instance, when if you are aware, and hence if you recall, Coca-Cola, now the Coca-Cola that we see now, which had entered India in 1991, 91 or 92, I think it had entered. In fact, that was a re-entry of the firm. It was operating in India. It was selling its beverages way back in 60s and 70s too. But then, at a point of time where the political developments in the country took such a turn, where at one point of time the government wanted Coca-Cola to reveal its products formula, the concentrates formula, right? So that had threatened its very sensitive aspect called the formula of the product, and then that threatened, and they refused to divulge, refused to expose formula, and they went back, and they came back to India only when we opened our gates in the name of globalization and liberalization. Threat to the established relationships, that could be a sensitive area where you are a cartel, or you are collaborating with, or you are teaming up, you get well with your friends, your bosses, your superiors, subordinates, and suddenly there is a rehash, there is a reorganizing that might bring in some threat to the established power relationships, uh, and that might hence witness some resistance. Okay. Overcoming resistance. How do you overcome? Tactics. You may have to educate or communicate. You may have to allow them to participate. You can go a little democratically rather than just instructing um, through mails in invisible mode. Make it more visible, make it more democratic, allow them to participate in the change process. So that can be facilitate and support them, hand holding, negotiate, talk out what is their interest and how can you address that, um, what best can the organization do to make them embrace, adopt the change. Manipulation, co-optation. So when all these above ones fail, then you may have to adopt some of the dark strategies. Manipulating, co-opetition. Co-opetition is again a portmanteau word of cooperation and competition. Co-optation. Co-optation is where you're cooperating at the same time you're competing. So it has a flavor of manipulation, and when even that fails, you are coercing, that is, you are applying pressure, you are intimidating, you are applying pressure by force, you are getting it done. You stay or you are fired, you change or you are fired. That's a kind of coercive statement which compels people to change, leaving them with no option. So those are some of the ways resistance can be overcome. Okay, so that's one of the most popular models, Kurt Lewin's three-stage. So there are basically two popular models. One is John Cotter's eight-step model, and Kurt Lewin's three-step model. This is rather simple one where the entire change process is demonstrated in three steps: unfreeze from the existing state, move to the new state, and refreeze in the new state. Easier said than done, of course. So what does it comprise? Unfreezing, change efforts to overcome the pressures of both individual resistance and group conformity. So by applying all those tactics of overcoming resistance, you unfreeze and then you refreeze, where you stabilize the changed interest. So moving is something happening between unfreezing and refreezing. Refreezing is stabilizing a change intervention by balancing, driving and restraining, balancing the driving forces and the restraining forces. Driving forces are the forces that facilitate the change, and restraining forces are the forces that hinder, that inhibit, or that weaken the change. Yeah, forces that direct behavior away from the status quo, restraining forces that hinder the movement from existing equilibrium. Okay. So as we said, that was Kurt Lewin's model, and Cotter's model is an eight-step process where John Cotter explains that change can be brought about through these eight steps. That is, you have to establish a sense of urgency, create a compelling reason. Why do you need to change? People will probably be ready to change provided they see their interest in the change. Why do they have to change? What is it? What benefit has it got for them to change? So that thing has to be brought out very clearly in the first stage. Establish a sense of urgency, create a compelling reason. Form a coalition, form a team, form a strong team that can go together collectively into the new state, create a new vision, and communicate that vision. You have to show the people that how they are placed, how better they are placed, by embracing the change, by communicating and communicate that vision. Empower people. Don't make change a one man process or a one person activity. You have to accommodate, you have to allow people to participate in the process of change. Empower them, allow them to voice their opinions, their views. Six step plan for, create and reward the short term wins. So change is not a one day or a one overnight process, it is a long term process, and which can be broken down into various phases. So each success of each phase has to be brought out, communicated and celebrated, so it fills people with some kind of reinforcement, some kind of motivation boost to look at change in a very positive manner. Consolidate improvements, reassess the changes, see if the change that you brought about is sustainable, is long term oriented or not, and then reinforce the change over a long period of time by monitoring, evaluating the change. So that's how you can actually see Lewin's model in Cotter's model, or vice versa. When you look at the top four steps of change, that is, establish sense of urgency, form coalition, create a new vision, and communicate the vision, they actually are addressing the unfreezing part of Kurt Lewin. Whereas empower others by removing barriers, create and reward the short-term wins, consolidate, reassess, and adjust is addressing the movement. Whereas the last one, that is reinforce the changes, is about a rephrasing of Kurt Lewin's model of change management. Okay, so that brings us to the close of change management as an organizational essential.